Hey there, Aaron Houston here, teaching you how to throw an axe. My cat Rambo might help too, I'm not sure. Okay, first of all, uh, I want to start this out by saying that there are a couple of things, basically a two-step process that you're going to engage in to both land axes yourself consistently and teach other people to land axes themselves consistently. The first one will be throwing the axe in a manner that keeps it in a flat plane of motion along the center axis of the axe. Um, that is going to prevent a wobble. You're going to ideally avoid a wobble. What happens if you get a wobble is that the axe comes into the target like that and bounces off. Okay? So, two-step process is that you first want to eliminate that wobble by getting the axe traveling in a center plane, flat plane of motion. Um, and then number two, you're going to fix the distance, okay? And I'm going to teach you how to do that today. We're going to first go through the fundamentals of how to grip and throw the axe and the motion of it. And then I will sort of get back to that meta level of the two-step process of analysis of the wobble and distance. To start, grip and aim. You're going to teach people to grip the axe. Everybody does this differently. Some people do this differently. Some people grip up here. I like to grip down here. And I like to teach people to just tap right here to feel that they can actually feel both the bottom of the haft of the axe and also the meat of their hand, so that they know that they've got that axe at the very bottom. Why is that? It's because as this axe is releasing from your hand, it's, in my estimation, a little bit easier if the axe is at the bottom, if your hand is at the bottom rather of the haft, so there's less resistance on that axe as you're letting it go. There's less friction on it, basically. Again, different people do it differently. This is just how I teach it. I found the most success with this and teaching people that. I also teach people to line up the knuckles, that's basically the center of their knuckles, with the center axis of this axe, of the handle, the haft. Why is that? Because that is going to help you get that flat plane, that flat center plane of motion. Okay? So now, generally you're going to be teaching people to throw two-handed, and what that's going to look like is this so this is always going to be your dominant hand gripping the axe. The non-dominant hand is going to be a guide hand, basically, so just gently going over there. And that's basically because it's hard, I think, for a lot of people to get a center plane of motion directly over, try to get you to see this, directly over their heads. To get that flat plane of motion. So that's what this allows us to do. It helps us to keep this in a very flat plane of motion so that it's going to travel to the target without wobbling. How do we aim? We aim by basically, first you always want to teach people to aim first. And it's funny, I gotta tell you, it's wild how often I'll hear from students or clients, they'll say, the axe will go way off on a shot, and look, I don't know what happened, and they'll say, well, where were you aiming? And they'll be like, I wasn't even aiming. So this is a really fundamental thing, and you just got to make sure you sometimes have to remind people, sometimes you have to remind yourself to aim. One way to do that is before you even take any shot, you just, as you're getting ready, you line up that axe, line up the top of that axe with where you want it to go, basically, in line with your eye, okay? All right. So next, we have the motion of throwing the axe, which we've already gotten into a little bit. It's basically the flat plane of motion. You're going to want to teach people to actually bring the axe so far back that they actually touch their back with it. Now, I don't actually touch my back with the axe when I'm throwing it. I don't think most professional throwers do. The reason we teach people to do that is to remind them that they really have to put a lot of wind up into this. They need to put that amount of wind up in because that's the potential energy they're storing, they're releasing as they throw it, and they're turning it into kinetic energy. And the more we wind up, the more kinetic energy we're going to release. In terms of that motion, your non-dominant foot, usually, and this, different people do this different ways, there are a lot of ways to do this, but generally speaking, what works for beginners is to have them be gripping with the dominant hand, guide hand here, and then taking a step with the non-dominant foot forward. Something like that. Now, we've covered grip and aim and motion of that throw. Those should ideally allow us to, again, get that axe into a flat plane. Let me see if I can line this up with the camera. Flat plane of motion, so that the axe does not wobble and therefore bounce off the target once it reaches the target. That's number one. Number two is the distance. So once we fix that wobble, once we make sure that people have a good grip and aim and good motion, and their foot and body movement is enough, they're transferring enough energy to actually land that axe in the wood, and it's not going to wobble, it's traveling again in a flat plane of motion. Once we figured that out, now then all we have to figure out is how far they need to be from the target. Why is that? Everybody's body is different. I'm a relatively medium-sized guy, but I've got a monkey's like proportion in terms of my wingspan. My arms are really long. Some people have longer torsos and legs, and some people have a really long stance or step. All those things are going to affect. Sometimes people will have physical limitations in how they can move their bodies. All those things are going to have an impact on how far that person's distance is going to be for their sweet spot in terms of landing the axe. Okay, so once we fix that wobble, in terms of distance, how to diagnose that, it's going to look something like this. The axe, ideally, a person's ideal shot, if this were the target board, the axe would land about like that. If they are too close to the target, then the axe isn't going to have time to complete the rotation, and it's going to pop off of there, hitting the handle. If they're too far from the target, then the axe will over-rotate and the head will hit. Thus, the axe will not land. Okay, so last thing I'm going to go into here is, I know, buddy. Last thing I'm going to go into here is oh, big guy, you going to come help me? Is mindset. And why do I talk about mindset here? Why is this so important? Well, how much, if you ever heard, great athletes talk, you hear people who have achieved great things talk about doing difficult things or doing scary things sometimes, but especially when we're talking about athletes performing at a peak level. You'll hear people say consistently that it's 90% mental, right, Rambo? He agrees, it's 90% mental, and it's just 10% physical. So if we agree with that, which a lot of people you hear this a lot. Now, if we agree with that and we take that as true, then think about this for a moment. How much time do you spend practicing your perfect throw for axes, or do you spend practicing a technique in whatever sport you play, or do you spend time at the gym conditioning your body? How much time do you spend on all those physical aspects? But then how much time do you actually spend getting your head right before you do something difficult? How much time are you putting into making sure that your head is in the right place before you go to take that perfect throw and to try to replicate that perfect throw over and over again? And obviously that's a much bigger discussion, and we'll go into that in future coaching sessions. But this applies to everything in your life, really, this mindset part of it. Getting your head right, and talked to some of you about this already, gone into more depth, and you know what I'm talking about here. It's the way that you get replicable positive results. You can actually land those throws over and over and over again, and also help other people and to coach other people out of when they get discouraged. So it makes for a much better experience for the clients. It makes them feel like they've achieved something great and actually overcome a fear, and that's an experience that you can't, it's priceless. You can't replicate it. All right, I'm out of here. Good luck.